And reminder, I'm Chris Gardner of the Houston Roundbar Review. You are watching The Lunch Break, powered by JM&E on YouTube and on Roku on the BS3 Network. Joining me right now is Yanez from Gallery Sports, and we're going to bring in the awesome, sensational, knowledgeable queen of Big 12 now and ESPN Plus for Kansas Athletics to get her perspective and probably compare and contrast how things are done at KU for spring football to Houston. Miss Kennetra Pulliams, how are you, ma'am?
Hey, Chris. Hey, Andy. How you guys doing?
Doing
Doing
great.
good.
Kennetra, has KU had
Yes.
their football spring game?
They've had their spring football event.
That's better. That's better. Yeah.
As they titled it this year. It's the spring showcase, and it happened last Friday. So yes, it has happened.
And how was attendance? What was it like? Describe the event for the audience here on the lunch break.
It was free.
Okay, that's good. Did it rain?
No, weather was good.
It was outdoors.
Outdoors. It was at the stadium. It was a Friday night, just because the season opener will happen on a Friday night. So it was a controlled scrimmage. It was some 7-on-7, some 9-on-9. You could see the new uniforms and then go out and purchase them. And so you just kind of, basically it was the culmination of spring football practice. It was their 15th spring football practice. That's what it was.
How was there an announced attendance for the event?
No.
What would you say in terms of, how lately, last few years, how many times has KU done a spring event for football?
They do it every year.
Even when they were bad, awful.
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah. They do one every year. They try to tie it in. They bring the alumni back. They have a golf outing and try to make a whole weekend out of it. The scoring, it's not your traditional scoring. You have your first team offense versus your second team defense, and vice versa. And then you get, +1 for a good play, -1. So, the score was like 12-0 was the final score. But, that doesn't really say who won, because it really wasn't a winner. It was just kind of like, hey, here's what we've been working on. Here's some of our new players. Some of the key players were held out. Kenny Logan, for instance, he underwent surgery. He didn't take part in spring football whatsoever. Starting lineman, center Mike Nowitzki, nicknamed Dirk, obviously. He spent the entire game up in the broadcast booth working on his career after football. So, you didn't really get to see what you're going to see in the season opener in the fall.
Sure. Tony M., as a Coug follower and supporter, what are your thoughts on what Kennetra just said about Kansas football has had a spring event every year? And yes, it is some shade, but KU football has not been great every year up until the most recent years, correct? Or even good, competitive, right, Kennetra?
That's fair.
Okay, I'm just putting it out there for Coug fans, and it's a way to showcase, introduce, and connect with your fans, and just help them. Hey, these are our players for this year's team. Get to know them, and that's what it's about. It's not winning or losing. It's just another way to promote your team, your players, and get them excited about the upcoming football season. Would y'all agree with that?
Get a head start on season ticket sales. It's just kind of, generate some buzz. And so instead of just full game, it was a glorified spring practice that was kind of post-produced to put a pretty bow on it. And then it did not air live, is what I'm going to say.
Okay. That's another question I was going to ask you. But Andy, do you have any questions for Kennetra before we get going further into this?
No, any question? I was looking up, and she'll get right into. She very specifically, it didn't air live, but she'll lead on to that. But just hearing her describe it, it sounds pretty similar to the football event that Houston had last year. Again, it's kind of like a culmination of the spring sessions. It's not necessarily a game; it's much more. Again, pretty similar, controlled. They run different situations, whether it be 7-on-7, 9-on-9, and again, sounds pretty similar. I'm not sure if Houston has ever sold merchandise at the spring events. That's the only thing that stood out of differences.
Well, that's a missed opportunity if they haven't, and they should going forward. I mean, Andy, we have merch now for Let's Rage Cougs. We're going to push that more and more every chance we get. So why not do that same thing for UH football? As Tony says right here, UH needs to build their brand up, even if we do expect losing. Yes, you have to give fans a reason to care about the program. Because Andy, where would you say right now that the fans are? The fans more apathetic to this coming season in football, or they care enough, but they just expect a lot of losing?
Second, it's definitely the second option. I think there is certainly, I mean, there's obviously buzz because they're going to be moving and making that jump into the Big 12. I don't think it's necessarily at a point where there's apathy around the program. I think it's much more so frustration would probably be the, maybe not the exact word, but obviously there's, I saw something on the other day in one of the forums where they said they would consider it a good season if Houston went 5-7 in their first year in the Big 12. So I don't know if you could. Obviously, that's just a microcosm. That's one individual, but it's much more kind of, I would say, wait and see, because there is excitement, there is buzz around the program making that jump into the Big 12, but it's very much they're interested to see how they can compete, and I guess really much more they're trying to get a true gauge of where they stack up once they do indeed join the Big 12 conference, because I mean, if you look at the non-conference schedule, the last few times that they have played Big 12 opponents, it hasn't worked out in the favor of Houston. But this is, like I said earlier in the show, this is very much indeed a program in transition, not only from making that conference jump, but in the roster creation in and of itself.
And I think also what's different as far as geography is the size of the city of Houston versus, say, Lawrence, Kansas, say, Morgantown, West Virginia. Also, there's so many different options on how sports fans can spend their recreational dollars in Houston
Sure.
versus in Kansas or in the Midwest. So I think there's a lot of draw, whether it's the Rockets, the Astros, the Texans, the Dash. There's so many different ways, and then you have to compete with college athletics as well. So I think that's a different variable to contend with, or at least consider.